Good morning. I'm Colonel Jared Veneta, and I'm currently serving as the C4 Operations Division Chief at U.S. Indo-Pacom, and I will be moderating today's panel on cyberspace operations in the Indo-Pacific. Specifically, how we synchronize and integrate cyber effects across the theater. Our purpose today is to enhance understanding of cyberspace operations and to highlight the unique and team-centric facets of the cyberspace domain and how pervasive these operations, activities, and investments are within the joint and warfighting context. Lastly, I want to highlight the importance of our partnership with industry. Being able to work in concert with industry to leverage the latest in technology at speed and scale is a capability that our adversaries and even some of our allies cannot do well. This is a significant advantage for the U.S. military. To that end, I will look to have a short question and answer period from the audience toward the end of our hour-long discussion. The goal is to make sure industry understands our requirements and can develop capabilities that meet our needs and mission requirements. Now, please allow me to introduce our panel members. Captain Vic Taylor is currently serving as the N6 of Pacific Fleet, having recently completed a command tour at NCTS Far East in Yokosuka, Japan. Captain Ron Ariano stood up and took command of Cyber Group 1 at Wahiwa this summer. Prior to that, Ron was the director of the Cyber Operations Integrating Planning Element, or COIPE, at Indo-Pacom. Colonel Toby Ladd is currently serving as the commander of DISA Pacific, having previously served in my job at U.S. Indo-Pacom. Captain Oscar Simmons is currently serving as the J6 of U.S. Forces Japan at Yokota Air Base. And finally, Lieutenant Colonel Cliff Cardwell is the technical branch director within the G39 Information Maneuver Division at Marine Forces Pacific here in Hawaii. So as you can see from our panel, we have individuals with in-depth knowledge and backgrounds in cyberspace operations and significant and recent operational experience across our theater. So with that, we'll get into the questions. So Ron, the first one is for you. How do you envision cyberspace operations being more fully integrated into joint and combined operations across the Pacific, specifically during crisis and conflict?
All right. Well, thanks for giving me a swing at this first one. So I think when we talk about joint combined and then creating that comparative advantage, it really comes down to three kind of core characteristics that really don't change between competition or crisis or conflict. And those three are joint, the ability to operate as a joint force, the ability to integrate across domain, commander, objectives, and infuse those things. I think the second one has to be that it has to be an all-domain approach. Whether it's cyber or maritime fires or protection on the land component, those things in and of themselves will not necessarily be the critical capability that gives us the driving force to win. It really has to be across the joint warfighting functions, and you have to kind of take a step back, especially when it comes to cyber, a domain that really traverses all other domains, and so that it really minimizes the differences that geography makes, down to milliseconds. That all-domain approach and understanding kind of what the broader picture is and how cyber could be of use is key. And then the last, critical characteristic has got to be multi-partner. I think we've seen time and again that first it starts with, it's really no particular order, interagency. Depending on where the terrain that's under threat is, we have to leverage the other interagency partners that may have the authorities, the insights, the ability to take action. Second, it would be partners, foreign partners and allies that are in this fight with us together, because again, cyber as a domain knows no boundaries. And so while sovereign nations may own infrastructure, may own core capability and network capability, ultimately it's a team sport, and we have to rely on those particular sovereign nations to help defend and attack terrain based on their own sovereign laws. And then lastly, I think, Jared, you mentioned it as one of the core pieces for bringing this forum together is its industry. Nothing scales cyber operations than industry does. We are built upon a foundation of a man-made environment that is really driven by industry. And so, whether it's scaling updates, scaling capabilities, all those things are contingent upon our partnership with industry. So, I would say, those three characteristics, joint, all-domain, multi-partner, are really the key facets to any victory across any landscape.
Thanks, Ron. And since Ron mentioned multi-partner, I'll throw the next question to Captain Oscar Simmons, who works with one of our key partners in the region, Japan. So Oscar, what are the biggest challenges in synchronizing cyberspace capabilities with allied and partner nations in the Indo-Pacific, and how can we overcome policy and interoperability challenges?
Thank you for the question. First, I'd like to say that it's good to see my own partners, members from the Japanese Joint Staff are here today, and I'd like to recognize them because we are always traveling together and working together. So one is being together in the fight. That's number one operation, is ensuring you understand one another by operating together. Number two is I'm going to come off on the high level and try to work my way down. We have to work on budgeting. Let me just start about that. The U.S. needs to create a budget. And when working with the Japanese, we have to get in front of their budget because they get their budget 2 years out. And by the way, their fiscal year starts in April, the year of. So understanding those budgetary cycles and the fact that they're limited by the fact that they've already created this idea and they have less flexibility is something that we need to work to make sure that, and I'm trying to kind of gauge my answer to the crowd as industry is here. We need to work to that. And the other thing that was we look with Japan specifically, because that's my area of focus, is we need to be able to partner with Japanese companies. They have very similar ideas with us, where it is they're nationalists in industry, and so the ability to be willing to couple with a Japanese firm is important to be able to do business there and operate. But it is sincerely important as we look to tie our networks and connections together. The most important being is how do we create areas where we can share information, do it securely, and then be able to do it quickly are those areas that I would focus on.
So Captain Taylor, having recently come from Yokosuka, has a pretty unique perspective on this as well. Vic?
Yeah, and as we engage here with industry, one of the key points to consider also is the thing that we're leveraging affordable for the partner that we have, right? We can't go in with something that's so expensive or so state-of-the-art that we can't offer it to partners. And we take a look across the Pacific, right? There's partners at various levels, for GDP purposes. You take a look at it. And then the second piece, and Oscar hit on that very extensively, is the fact that you have desperate security standards, right? So how do you enable technology to allow partners at varying levels of maturity and cyber maturity and security engage and join in that? And I know Indo-PACOM is well positioned to do a lot of that and moving forward, and we're looking forward to working with them and you all. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question goes to Lieutenant Colonel Cardwell, and it's related to deterrence in cyberspace operations. So Cliff, the question is, how can cyber effects be leveraged to strengthen deterrence in the region without escalating tensions or unintentionally crossing red lines for our adversaries?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? So this is a difficult question, and that no one really knows the right answer here. But what I would say is it's far more nuanced and complex. It's a far more nuanced and complex challenge than in the physical world. Doing this in the cyber realm, traditional concepts of deterrence based on threat of retaliation are less effective due to ambiguity surrounding what's acceptable behavior. we must balance peace through credible strength. A credible deterrent posture requires demonstrating both defensive and offensive capabilities. We must possess the ability to not only defend our systems, but also to inflict unacceptable costs on potential adversaries should they cross our defined red lines, which we need to clearly define. This requires investment in those advanced cyber capes and the willingness to use them when necessary, and it also must be believable. Next, building resilience into our systems is a crucial element of cyber deterrence as we continue to make our critical infrastructure networks more difficult to attack and we harden them, and more resilient to disruption. We reduce the incentive for adversaries to actually want to target them. So it's going to involve redundancy, robust defense, and rapid recovery capes, stuff you've all heard before, but this ties back into deterrence. And finally, we need to actually vocally pair up with the information operations side of the house, right? The information warfare side of the house, and signal intent. So clearly communicating our intentions and capabilities is essential for deterring the adversary. However, the inherent difficulty of attributing those cyber attacks makes it extremely challenging. So we must develop those methods for signaling our resolve and communicating the consequences of an adversary hostile cyber action.
So Lieutenant Colonel Cardwell and a lot of the other panel members have hit on a key point. Cyberspace operations is not just offensive. It is network operations delivering a C4 capability to the commander. It's defensive cyber operations. It's cybersecurity support. It's the whole gamut of what we do within C2. And with regard to deterrence, it's more challenging in this arena. Unlike nuclear deterrence, when the adversary understands your capability, it's difficult to threaten if the adversary doesn't understand what your capability is. So there's some nuance to this domain. But with respect to critical infrastructure, the next question will go to Colonel Ladd, and it's focused on resilience of our critical infrastructure, both Department of War as well as our commercial infrastructure. So Toby, how are we working with regional allies and partners to build resilience in critical infrastructure, both the military and civilian, that our adversaries might target through cyberspace operations in crisis or conflict?
No, thanks, Jared. It's always good to be when you're on an amphibious panel, like Navy Marine Corps, so I'm very comfortable on the panel. But impacts to critical infrastructure is something we see every single day, right? You can go back and look at NSA and FBI public reports that have gone out that have been disseminated both to warn industry and our allies to say the adversary, China, is targeting your critical infrastructure. That's known, right? So as I look out as the Indo-Pacific commander, looking at power, looking at water, looking at transoceanic trunks that are being targeted, we're working with commercial industry to build more resilient and diverse architecture across the Pacific, thing one. Thing two, how do we do integrated defense with industry? Something we really are treading new ground on as we're bringing in new industry partners and how we're looking at some of these capabilities both internally and externally for critical infrastructure, how we can better and partner and defend. And then lastly is just the partnership. Much easier when we're having the discussion on US soil, a little more nuance when we're moving to a partner ally location of how are we going to get into critical defense architecture and infrastructure that we in the Department of War need when it matters. So diversifying some of that critical infrastructure, working with industry to build upon that, integrated defense with industry on some of that critical infrastructure, and then the partnerships, both allies and partners and with industry. But I would say that gets to a new level of trust, that go both ways. Sharing intelligence, sharing best practices on how we can better defend those resources. Thanks, Jared.
Thank you. So the next question will go to Captain Taylor, and it's relating to agility with respect to our operational tempo. Though the Indo-Pacific Theater is the largest geographic combatant command within the United States Joint Force. And with that and all the partners that we operate with, there is a high operational tempo even during competition, constantly training with our allies and partners. So Vic, to that end, in a theater that spans half the globe, how do we ensure cyber forces can respond rapidly and with precision to emerging threats and opportunities within the theater?
And first and foremost, guys, I didn't say thank you, and it's an honor to be on this panel with you all, and learning and being here with you. So to answer this question, it's a difficult challenge, right? And it's one that Admiral Kaler had just talked to us about. How do we address that issue? How do we bring technology to bear at speed and tempo, but then also train individuals so that they're effective using it to render the objectives that we want? That's the challenge of today. And I will tell you that I'm not sure we're doing it quite well as we need to. So what do we need to do? One, we need to bring rapid acquisition strategies to bear, right, with technologies that may not be as mature as we want them to be, but moving us in the direction that we need to be, right? So that is industry and a responsible partner on industry to be recommending products and telling us where those products and the maturity levels and the risks that are associated with them, right? Then as we get to those, finding avenues and mechanisms to test them, to validate, to develop ConOps, right, such that we can interoperate within the joint world, all the forces that you see here, Army, Marine Corps, Space Force, Air Force, in addition to our partners, right? And we talked about that being at various levels of capability with the partners. How do we move forward, but also at some point maintain backwards compatibility? And then the last piece is how we train our personnel to be effective using the technology. So oftentimes we get to a point where we say, all you need is this piece of equipment and it'll do it for the technician, right? The technician doesn't need to do anything. Well, that's until power goes out in the middle of the ocean on the ship, that piece of equipment went down, and now we need to figure out how to reconfigure it and get it to, interoperate with the other pieces of equipment that it has, right? So I'm looking at this from a very, very foundational aspect, right? How do we rapidly get what you're creating to the warfighter? How do we do it in a responsible fashion? How do we train them so that they're effectively doing it? And that's the challenge that we face today.
So for the industry partners, since Captain Taylor mentioned rapid acquisition, as you're thinking about questions, please consider, do you understand our requirements? Have we communicated them properly to you? Do you understand combined, joint, all-domain command and control and the standards and protocols with which we're trying to define and operate? Or do you have questions on it? Or do you have suggestions on how we can do that more efficiently? Think along those lines to make sure that we are accurately telling you what we need so you can come to us with a mature product that we can immediately start to use. So the next question goes back to Oscar for information sharing and classification, particularly with our partners in the First Island chain. So Oscar, what mechanisms are needed to improve timely intelligence and cyber threat information sharing with regional partners while balancing classification and security concerns?
Thanks for the question. First, I would say we need to focus on getting to zero trust. It is a mandate within the Department of War that we get to that point, and we need to process in the fact of information is only provided to people who individually have access to that, ensuring that only our partners that we want have access to the information, and then obviously adversaries will not gain. Number two is availability of that data. Part of that is ensuring that, as was just mentioned by PacFleet, that we board position as much as possible data centers and data so that the processing can be done and minimize the latency of accessing that data and getting it quickly. And to that end, I would just expand it a little bit beyond cyber and speak to standards that exist outside the US. A lot of times we get very conditioned to what the FCC requires with regards to frequencies and stuff, and I know I'm speaking to transport, vice cyber here, but companies need to be aware of what the frequency spectrums and operating areas are for partner nations, so that your technology can migrate easily into that partner and does not become a problem as we try to implement it forward.
Thanks. Thanks, Oscar. And since Captain Simmons mentioned zero trust, as you're thinking about your questions and your requirements that you need to get from us, think about how we need to evolve and move to that zero trust environment versus the standard legacy perimeter-based defense approach that we've had in the past. And what changes would you possibly recommend for how we architect our networks, how we move data across the battlefield? What do we need to think differently about as you try to understand our problem of sharing data with allies and partners across the theater at a very fast pace? So the next question, go back to Lieutenant Colonel Cardwell and focus more on offensive cyber considerations. So Cliff, what strategic, operational, and legal considerations guide the employment of offensive cyber effects in the Pacific theater, given that we are in competition, not crisis conflict right now? And what would you say for conflict?
First, I would respond with, do we have a skiff nearby? So I'll start with strategic objectives. We need to clearly define what these strategic objectives are as the starting point, as we do with everything else. And once we define those, we need to understand how we achieve those objectives through the employment of offensive cyber capes. Offensive cyber operations should be carefully targeted and aligned with overall national security goals. And we should avoid the temptation to use these capes purely for tactical purposes. We also need to adhere to all the legal and ethical guidelines governing the use of offensive cyber capes. We should ensure that all cyber professionals are thoroughly trained on these frameworks and understand the potential consequences of violating them. One legal misstep can have serious strategic repercussions. So we need to understand that at each echelon and each party that's involved. And then we should also continue coordinating offensive cyber operations closely with all the government agencies, to include the intelligence community. These considerations ensure all the parties are on board from the very beginning when planning initiates, and that all actions remain consistent with U.S. foreign policies objectives, and they also don't undermine any State Department diplomatic efforts.
Okay, thank you. The next question, we'll pivot to our cybersecurity workforce and our cyber workforce across the theater, and it'll go to Colonel Ladd, but I'll turn it over to the rest of the panel as well. And this will focus not just on our military members, but a lot of our organizations have a heavy civilian workforce presence, government civilians, as well as a large contractor workforce that brings diverse expertise to our problem set. So starting with Colonel Ladd, training and workforce development. What changes are needed in training, education, and career pathways to ensure cyber workforce can meet the demands of contested operations in any theater, but in particular the Indo-Pacific?
No, it's a great question. So at Indo-Pacific, I have the pleasure and honor to lead an organization that's very diverse, from military members, government civilians, to contractors, right? Because we need all of them to come together to do that integrated defense. As we're transitioning from a network-centric environment to a data-centric environment, that is dynamic. And I will tell you, the training pipelines are not as fast as technology is evolving, right? And so we need to be going at light speed for training for a zero trust environment. How are we training our young military members, civilians, contractors to do an integrated defense of a zero trust cloud environment? Because that's where the networks, that's where the environment is going, right? And so being a student for a good part of my early part of my career, how are we going to make more modular capabilities as technology evolves to integrate back into the workforce for our military and civilian workforce? right? Coupled with our industry partners bringing that expertise into as that technology evolves, right? I see the partnership that we have only growing closer together, both in competition and as the technology evolves, specifically for a zero trust environment, but it's broader than that. It's transport, it's SD-WAN, it's all these technologies that are coming in that we are quickly implementing to bring strategic advantage. That expertise is also needed to defend, secure, and then operate and maneuver at a high level, not just to maintain it, but how can we be dynamic with those capabilities?
Can I? Yeah, so, I think, and this is something that I think Vic and I kind of came up on, right? We came up as submariners working in a highly technical field. And in that field, they kind of front-loaded all the training necessary in order to get a pathway to mastery. In the cyber landscape is much more dynamic than that, right? We know that technology changes overnight. We know that standards change and evolve. Whereas, if I were to crack open a nuclear reactor plant manual, it'd probably look the same as 6 years ago, right? So we have to acknowledge that fact and embrace it, that across the cybersecurity workforce, that the requirements will always evolve and typically evolve at a pace that probably outpaces our traditional view of how the military has looked at training, where we have a nice schoolhouse, we have courses that we've designed, we built train the trainers. And so, in my opinion, definitely to kind of attain that level of agility and that continuous path to mastery, because I don't think we'll ever get there so long as technology evolves. Maybe we need to look at training as a service in certain capacities, but they have to be informed by the standards set in place. And I think that's sort of that delicate balance of, there are standards and policies in order to operate and levels that are defined, but then to kind of rely on single point military solutions or traditional institutions to do that might not be the best solution in order to fight the future fight.
And just lastly, if you hear nothing else today about training, then listen to this piece, right? Show me a capability that doesn't have the training associated with it, and what you have is nothing, right? And so as you're out here poising yourself to communicate to, the panel or other members out there, I need to stress upon you that there needs to be a training continuum mechanism for whatever capability you're bringing to bear, in addition to a level of compatibility, even though I understand proprietary design and information as associated with your companies. But what we're seeing is if your technology that you're bringing to bear may be awesome, but if the individuals don't know how to use it at the tip of the spear, then it's worthless to us, right? And you're going to go with something else that may not be as good as what you have to offer, but they're trained on it, they know how to leverage it, and they know how to use it. Oh, by the way, it's interoperable with other systems that are bringing technologies to bear as well. So if you're not thinking about that and you're trying to use an old business model, I'm telling you, you're going to be left behind too, because we're moving very fast and rapidly away from maintaining and staying in those proprietary kind of like long-term relationships.
So staying on this for a minute, I'll open up for the entire panel. Same type of training challenges, but how do we do it with our allies and partners? How do we make sure that we're bringing them up to speed, given that they have their own requirements for their networks? So I'll turn it over to anyone who wants to jump on it.
Yeah, I'll jump on that one first. I think it's just being very open with allies and partners. And as we're building towards an integrated defense and figuring out some of this new technology, we're embedding them with our capabilities, right? So bringing them into the fold where we can, right? To build that shared understanding and defense of those capabilities, particularly with the allies in the Pacific.
And I'll jump on that if you don't mind. I will say that our partners are already looking at industry standards of U.S. industry standards, so as long as we keep to that, we will do well as we look forward to partnering with them. The other one I would offer is you would conduct the training, and then I completely concur on what Vic said, ensuring that training is part of the systems, but that the systems themselves are outlined very clearly on how they meet those standards so that it speeds up the acquisition process and permissions to procure.
And if you're a partner, right, you got to also think about, and you're engaging with our partners, you got to also think about their perspective, right? So you have another nation come into the United States and say, hey, I have this capability that my nation creates for you. Take it because it's better than whatever you have. That's not the way that we need to present our case. You need to look at opportunities to partner with companies that are within that nation to help them also, right, and help us, right? Like, so it's a relationship, right, between industry and multiple industries with countries, right, to help build their capacity and capability as well. And sometimes fostering that relationship may benefit long-term relationships financially and economically for you all. But that's the perspective too. Don't come into the conversation with just what we have to offer and try to force feed a partner a capability that you have without truly investing in them as well.
So as we're talking about training, we, once again, the government, need to be very clear on what we're looking for. We need to help you better understand CJAD C2 and what we're looking at. Because especially for our smaller industry partners, you don't have the capability to design something and miss and then get to do it again. The funding can be tight. The same is true with our allies and partners. They have to know clearly where we're going so they can take their much more limited resources and funding and position themselves to be interoperable with us. So clearly communicating what we're trying to do with our network, moving our data around the battlefield is important. Next question goes back to Captain Taylor regarding multi-domain operations. So how can cyber effects be better synchronized within space, maritime, and information operations to create integrated multi-domain advantages within the Indo-Pacific theater?
You know, I'm actually gonna pass that to you, Ron. That was one of your 3 pillars, right? And I'd like for you to just have some buy-in and discussion on that, and if I'll come in on top. If you don't mind.
Go ahead.
No, okay, so for me, that orchestration is really the key factor, right? And I don't know that anyone, like if we look at case studies on what we've observed to happen in open source in the Middle East with Iran or with Russia and Ukraine, or even what we've seen adversaries in this theater do in open source. I don't think that we've necessarily fully realized the potential of what orchestrating effects means in a battle space, right? But that's really the task at hand. It's how do we understand, that graduated scale of operations, activities, and investments, independent of what phase of conflict we're in, and scaling it appropriately, right? So maybe in competition, much of what we do will be the synchronizations and integration of defensive cyber operations in the battle space on critical infrastructure and key resources, being partner-driven and interoperable. But maybe as we head to crisis or conflict, we start collapsing and bringing in a little bit more of the offensive cyber operations as flexible deterrence and then flexible response. But I think we definitely have to get out of the mindset of point targeting, especially in cyber. It's a dynamic landscape. I would offer that any target is dynamic just because of the network conditions change almost instantly with every upgrade. And then also, the other aspect of it that I would offer is that we have to continue to be in it and represent or demonstrate capability, because everyone has sort of their opinion about escalation. Certainly the standards of conduct and what we've seen globally are probably far less than what we've planned or assessed would happen when we try to drive ConOps through. So I think really those facets would be ones that I would harp on.
And then, just coming in on top of that, thanks, Ron, for taking that curveball I just gave to you. But also, when we talk about, all domain, we have to, our traditional sense of what a network means has changed, right? So now the network is all of it, to include the RF to the transoceanic trunks. And then now we're talking about, okay, well then, we're including space in this conversation. But now the introduction of the unmanned equation, and right, how do we C2 unmanned assets effectively and ensure that they're integrated with what we're attempting to do, right? So as you take a look at this problem set, right, we all have various pieces of it at this table, and all very important. But what I would tell you is the most important thing is not operating in a siloed manner, right? It is a models-based system engineering approach, right, to understand how your piece of this pie interfaces with the overarching, architecture, and that's where we try to find out where the gaps and seams are, right, as we take a look at this thing. So that's where I'm trying to uniquely position myself in this matter, understanding the entirety of the architecture, each piece of the domain that we're trying to exert our dominance in, and then understanding the key terrain within that piece, and then how we ensure and assure its continued availability during competition to crisis.
Just to add on that, Ron and Vic are some of the best in the business that do this every single day. Just to build on that, joint all domain operations, the synchronization of that is hard, right? Just think of it from a straight kinetic effects, non-kinetic, to diversity of the networks. For me, sometimes what can get lost is network operations and delivery of capability, right? Delivery of those specific capabilities so we can maneuver and get it to PAC fleet, so we can get it to that task force, so we can get it to that Marine Littoral Regiment, right? So looking at through the crisis to conflict scenario and looking at how the data is going to have to flow for those firing mechanisms becomes very, very hard. And there's an offensive side, there's a defensive side, and there is a delivery side, right, of those resources. And the synchronization of that is not getting easier, right? So looking at industry to help us, those critical data sets that we've got to deliver, syncing those together, synchronizing for delivery, those are some of the things I think from joint all domain operations that we're looking to get really, really right as we're moving forward.
So I was talking to someone earlier today here, and I didn't realize how many people here who know as much as they do don't have the latest or greatest when it comes to what we're looking for, what we really need help with. And so there's really 5 points I'd like to hit on that kind of capture that. So some of you gentlemen already hit some of those, so I'll kind of expound upon those. Number one is the cross-domain training. So truly, we need cross-domain training to all the personnel, enabling them to understand the capes and limitations of different domains and how they can be integrated with one another. The training should include those joint exercises, the simulation of the multi-domain scenarios, allowing people to practice coordinating their actions and achieving those objectives that we collectively want to get after. Number two, I know you gents hit on it, joint planning and coordination, and you've heard this a lot, but it really is an important thing, and there really is a significant gap when it comes to this. Multi-domain ops begin with integrated planning from the outset. Cyber effects specifically need to be seamlessly woven into the fabric of all these operational plans alongside space, maritime, air, land-based ops. And it's going to require early collaboration with the domain experts to ensure these cyber capes are effectively integrated and synchronized with those domains, and that includes you all as well being part of those discussions. Number three, we've talked a lot in the past about COPS, common operating pictures, and the need for just one thing that we can all look at and it makes sense to everyone at all echelons. So we need a shared understanding of the battle space across all domains, not just one or two or three. It should integrate data from multiple sources, including cyber sensors, space-based assets, maritime surveillance systems, ground-based intel, and then there's a collective shared understanding across the environment to enable us to make decisions across those domains. Number four, synchronizing effects is a big one. we're constantly trying to fill those gaps and figure out how to make them better. So the orchestration of cyber effects should be precisely synchronized with ops across the domains, which will create that synergistic effect to amplify the overall impact that we're looking for. And what that includes is looking at each one of those silos and bringing them all together when you're looking at the legal considerations, the technical considerations, how to make them better, quicker, faster, and talk to one another. And then just a quick example for cyber attacks, we can use them to disrupt adversary communications or disable air defense systems in support of a maritime operation. And then the timing and coordination are absolutely critical making that happen, right? And then the last one I wanted to point out was number 5, which was experimentation and innovation with all of you. So continuously experimenting, being there in those discussions so you have the latest on what it is we need and what we're looking for, with those new concepts in the multi-domain. And then it's going to require that consistent culture on our side to promote that culture of innovation for you all to get after those things, to take those calculated risks. And so, just kind of leave it with, we will continue to conduct those regular war games, simulations to test the new concepts, ideas, potential vulnerabilities, but you all should be a part of that.
And I got one more on this,
Yeah,
since everybody seems to be jumping on this question. And that is systems or abilities to detect potential attacks that are coming inbound to help us quickly diagnose and then do counter cyber fires would help, especially as we, in order to maintain a political correct, that's not the right word, but the apologies, the moral authority to not be the first to fire, we will likely be fired upon first. And cyber will be the first area in which we will be fired upon, thus detect and counterfire. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few more questions left, but I'm going to stop right now in order to allow some of our industry partners to ask the panel members questions. So, first question from an industry member, we'll get a brand new magnet from USFJ from Captain Simmons. So, who do I got? Sir, I think I saw you first in the blue coat. So please come on up and speak loudly if you don't mind.
Who's that to? Is it to anybody? Well, we know the most junior guy at the panel is the most prepared. But Toby, you want that one?
Yeah, I'll take it. So just to repeat, for those that didn't hear it, is I think to repeat the question is how do we prepare for defensive cyber with limited resources across Indo-PACOM AOR? Is that a good summation? Okay. Do we have all the capabilities to cover everything in the Pacific? No. Right? So those are strategic decisions that we have to make of what are the most critical assets, networks, infrastructure. That's a strategy, right, to apply those resources. Thing one. Thing two is how can we be more efficient with those resources? So please take a seat. How can we be more efficient with those resources? So between me as DISA Pacific, as a cybersecurity service provider, we're looking at different enclaves. How am I partnering with Cyber Group 1, with our cyber, with Marforce Cyber, to have a collective look of the 27 different networks that are being provisioned into the Indo-PACOM AOR, right? Some of them are good, right? Some of them are not good, and that's where we're going to apply those resources. Or where are defense critical infrastructure that we have concerns that we know the enemy's taking a look at. So there are resource and based discussions that are had. I would say technology with industry is also having a place on that. How can we use the data that we're getting to do predictive analytics for cyberspace defense, right, is another capability. Those data sets, those capabilities are coming online to support that level of decision making. And so decision making at speed and scale for defensive cyber operations is sort of where we're going. I'll pause there.
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit. One way I look at this is that we have varying degrees of operators when it comes to cybersecurity. We have our local defenders who are operating the network, keeping it up, maintaining it. We have our cybersecurity service providers who are kind of taking an overarching look at the traffic across the network, ensuring that we can spot attacks in one area and then apply it broadly. And then finally, you have defensive cyber forces that can come in, in response to intelligence or threats or incidents and respond to them. I think using them deliberately at scale is key. And the part that glues them all together is the data that they're looking at, right? And so I think that's a place where we're very much looking for solutions. How do we aggregate all that data? Whether you're a local defender, a CSSP, a cyber protection team, and then make use of it for what our role is within that defense in depth kind of concept. We have it in certain pockets, like Toby was saying, critical assets are certainly a place where we look at. I would also offer that it's not just isolated to information technology. We really need to be understanding what that means on the operational technology side, which is notably probably a little bit outside of our wheelhouses, traditionally speaking. Those are the nav facs of the world, the facilities commands that are really striving to protect those systems from compromise. What we've seen, I think, in this theater, living off the land, Vol Typhoon, is that there are new techniques. This is not indicators of compromise. Kind of, hey, update your scroll of what things to look for, fingerprints, but now it's patterns of behavior. This is where we really need to understand how AI, LLMs, large language models, and other kind of machine learning technology can really help, be our weapon, whether you're a local defender, a network analyst, or a network operator at a CSSP. So I think those are certainly key capabilities that we're looking to incorporate.
Sir, if you come up, I'll give you the mic. You can ask your question. Right here.
Thank you. I'm Mike Master from the SEI in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A number of you have talked about how having the industry rapid cycle of innovation represents a competitive advantage for U.S. operating forces. What is the clearinghouse and what is the recurring cycle where you take advantage of a weekly, monthly, quarterly cycle of innovation that's much faster than acquisition can handle? Thank you. Does that happen in theater at the J6 at Dissipac where?
I'll turn it over to the group here, but I think it doesn't happen well and at speed the way you're talking about. So Toby, you want to jump on it?
So Defense Innovation Unit, I think, is able to operate at speed and scale, right? That is Department of War's bid for success to say, how do we take a rapid acquisition strategy and get that into the hands of warfighters? That is active at Indo-PACOM. There was a process for that, for rapid acquisition and integration of capabilities. And so I think if you are linked in with Admiral Kaler's list of requirements, right, to go faster and enable warfighter at the tactical edge, that DIU, I think, is one of the clearinghouses to do that.
Yeah, there's also initiatives within each branch. You have convergence, I think is the Army. You have overmatch for the Navy. I would say you need to, from a programmatic perspective, the SysCom, I know they are operating and they have a conduit to where industry can go in on a web forum, submit their idea, right? And then from that point, right, the SysCom will go in and take a look, where does that line up? Contact them back to say, hey, does this match or align with the initiative that we have going, and try to pair you with that, right? I know PEO Digital, POC4I have that on some level that they're trying to get to. But I would get into that. I would get into, for the Air Force, probably the software factory aspect of what the Air Force is doing, whichever one that they have. And I really wish the Navy would take that initiative on as well. And I think we are, in the initial steps in trying to do that. Or taking some of these large exercises, right, and then getting with technical directors and some of that, like Pacific Rim Pack exercise, some of those, one that do have kind of concept of operations, portions of them, right, and industry validation and testing of capability associated with those exercises get associated with some of them.
Yeah, something I've thought about too is signaling to industry and partners, basically in and outside of sort of interagency, the use of cybersecurity advisories. Normally if the number of SEALs on that cybersecurity advisory represents how crucial and critical that advisory is because of the threat, the vulnerability. So I think there's a certain amount that can be intuited or derived from, what is the cybersecurity advisory looking to remediate or mitigate as an indication of what needs are there that industry might be able to provide solutions for.
Mike Engel with Astrion. I just want to say that I thought this was an exceptional conversation, and I appreciate it. But one of the partnerships, and I do think that is absolutely critical in all the things you mentioned, but one of the partners that you didn't specifically mention was academia. I was wondering if there's a specific reason for that or any challenges, or it's just, sort of shorthand that you went over it. And also, do we have issues with China and some of our other adversaries having access to U.S. universities, and with respect to, defense of critical infrastructure especially?
Well, that was probably an oversight on my part for not asking it, but we do have relationships, but I'll turn it over to the team.
Yeah, just to tie that in, the initiatives that I spoke to have relationships with academia, right? And so, at Pac Fleet, we used to have an initiative that I'm looking to probably try to re-energize again with academia, hiring local students from University of Hawaii to do summer internships and stuff like that. But that's not necessarily to some of the initiatives that you may be referring to. But if you get into conversions, if you get into overmatch, there are relationships with academia that are associated with those. Anybody else?
Yeah, locally we do have relationships with University of Hawaii, Go Bows, but I think we need to do more, right? So back to the earlier question of how can we inspire the next generation of innovation, cyber, technology. I think those are relationships we've got to foster better with academia, particularly with one of our greatest resources, our youth, to inspire that to come into either federal workforces, military, or just U.S. government.
Yes, sir.
Tony Mata with Modular Misfits. Got a question for you guys as far as like saying the silent. Am I not talking? Oh, sorry guys. Yeah. All right, Tony Mata with Modular Misfits. I got a question for you guys as far as like the silent part out loud. You say you want to get away from vendor lock-in, but we know that there are certain vendors that are tied into CJADC2 and JADC2 that make it very difficult to integrate with them. I've been at the large system integrators. I know the pain. I know it sucks. What is going to be done in order to make it easier to play nice with them?
I'm not sure who them is, so I'm going to say I don't necessarily want to get into that. But what I will say is just from taking a look at us is overhauling the way that we do contracts, right? Is a mechanism that could or should help in that. I know we're taking a look at that from a Navy perspective when we take a look at our Sting terminals, right? And being able to leverage any capability that comes to bear. We don't want to get tied in particularly to one service provider, right? If there's another one that can produce a capability at equal or better, for our forces, right? So that's something that we're looking into, and also going to industry and looking for agreements. Like, hey guys, like look, we know this technology changes every 6 months. Like, I can't get into this with you for the long term, but we can get into a long-term agreement to work with everyone else that is, or create solutions that have the ability to go into and be taken over by another entity that's easier. And you got to admit that maybe the product that you created was good 6 months ago, but ain't good now, right? And so it's up to you and incumbent upon you to stay on the cutting edge and produce technologies that are worth willing to investigate in. But I think it's contractually overhauling the way we look at contracts and the timeframes that we look at. If that answers your question to an extent.
Yeah, from a DISA perspective, requirements are clear and it's about delivery, right? And so here are the requirements. Can industry deliver? Yes, no, maybe. Yes, great. Move on, and so we can deliver for the warfighter. That's the model we're going with. And so not get into contractual agreements or any of that, but I think clear requirements from us, right? To make sure that's clear to industry, to make sure that you can deliver and that we can take on board as appropriate.
I guess I'd push back just a little bit on the question. We have the primes, who I think you're talking about, but you walk around this floor, there's a lot of industry here that wouldn't have been here 5, 10 years ago. Wouldn't have anything to do with the Department of War or anything with the military. It's changing. It's moving quicker. So what Colonel Ladd said about the requirements and a capability, the AI revolution, whatever we want to call it, is changing who we partner with and what we do. The hyperscalers is changing what we do and who we partner with. So there are a lot of new partners emerging in the field now that we haven't worked with traditionally in the past. So I think if you come with the capability, you understand our problem set and the requirements, I think there's a way to get in the door. Yes, we need to make it easier, but there's a way to get in. Next question, please. Yeah, Rob. Make it an easy one, Rob.
Good morning, gentlemen. Rob Anderson, IBM, retired commo, Marine. So last year I was here, and the big challenge I heard resonate from multiple speakers was C2 amongst the MPE within the Indo-Pacom, whether it was data standards, lines of communication, and so forth. During this year, I've seen a couple IRWPs that we can respond to, and we have. Are you aware of any future or any planned or future requests for information coming out associated to the problems that I'm still hearing?
Well, the panel's thinking, I can't think of anything right now. I think we've talked about the need for zero trust, the need to move seamless data around the battlefield at speed and scale within the joint force and with allies and partners, hence zero trust. I think network convergence is where we're going, whether we do it willingly or we're forced to. I think that's where we're going. And all of that in the vein of just speeding up our decision cycle using artificial intelligence. I think that's clearly what we're talking about doing. And this next battle will be fought on our network. Because unlike in Iraq and Afghanistan, our commanders cannot go out and see the fight. They cannot get right up on a city that we're attacking. This is a huge theater. They're completely relying upon the network for every warfighting function. So the requirements are pretty clear. It's how do we do it at speed and scale to outcycle the adversary. So with that,
I'm gonna plug my talk at 11:15, and then I'll answer your question.
Thank you.
Rosser, go ahead.
And then I'll just say again, going to understanding global standards, not just U.S. standards. And while you have security, I would say there's cybersecurity standards that are common, understanding what that looks like in other venues where we might see conflict is important.
So with that, I'm not going to end your opportunity to talk with our panel members, but I am going to officially end the panel. I want to give a round of applause to each one of our panel members. Thank you.
Good job. Thanks, Jared. Good job.